External restraint theory. External restraint theory. History and authors. The external restraint theory was developed by Andrew Henry and James Short in 1954. This theory is intended to explain why some people who are extremely frustrated commit suicide, while others who are just as frustrated turn to homicide instead. Both homicide and suicide are considered acts of frustration, fueled by aggression. This theory has been further studied by Martin Gold, stating that suffrage from strong external restraint results in homicide. Now we are going to define external restraints. External restraints can be a multitude of different things. First, it means the degree to which one's actions are required to adjust to the expectations and requests of another person or persons. Evidence shows that strong external restraint is linked to homicide, while weak external restraint is linked to suicide. Henry and Short defined the strength of external restraint as the degree to which behavior is required to conform to the demands and expectations of other persons. Suffering from a weak external restraint has been linked to suicide, meaning one blames himself for their aggression. Suffering from an external restraint that leads to homicide means that one is blaming others for their aggression. Now we are going to... What leads to homicide or suicide? When it comes to homicide, it is usually caused by physical punishment, whether it's when you're a child or an adult. One main cause is high levels of frustration. Homicide tends to be aggression directed towards another individual, even though they are angry with themselves. The lower class has higher homicide rate, as well as blacks have higher homicide rates. This is due to suffering from a stronger external restraint. If one suffers from extreme frustration with a strong external restraint, they would choose to direct their aggression toward homicide. This meaning they are blaming others for their frustration, not themselves. When it comes to suicide, it is caused by psychological punishment. This also means that they have a high level of frustration. Suicide tends to be when frustration and aggression is directed towards oneself and not others. One who is extremely frustrated with themselves commits suicide if they are suffering from a weak external restraint. People that commit suicide tend to blame themselves for all of their frustrations, not the outside world. What leads to homicide or suicide? There are two types of socialization that are correlated with the external restraint theory. The first one is physical punishment. This involves a parent using physical punishment to dishearten their mischievous child from further misbehavior. Examples would be spanking, slapping, hitting, and/or punching. This does not always have to come from a mischievous child. It could just be because the parent wants to act out on their aggression towards the child. Theory suggests that physical punishment led to noticeable anger towards another person. When the child punished grows into an adult, they are more likely to turn their aggression towards murder. The second one is psychological punishment. Children that are psychologically punished turn their aggression against themselves rather than others. Those who experience psychological punishment would elect suicide. The threat of not being loved anymore, coercion, harassment, and just being blamed for everyday things when it is not their fault all leads to psychological punishment and suicide. There are two types of socialization. Now the question is, why do people kill? Throughout time, sociologists have used the anime, strain, control, and social learning theory to try and exhibit what causes one to commit murder. One sociological theory, the external restraint theory, points to strong external restraint as the cause of homicide, while weak external restraint is the cause of suicide, so they're polar opposites. This may have been physically punished when they were a child, leading them to act out on their aggression towards others. Also, this type of person tends to blame others for their aggression and not themselves. They also act out in a fit of rage due to unforeseen problems of the past, causing them to suffer from a strong external restraint. People kill because it is an act of deviance that is driven from frustration that they have to act towards others. Now the question is, why do people kill? Some critiques that I've came across while studying the external restraint theory have been excessive external restraint or physical punishment encourages people to blame others rather than themselves for their own problems in life, which in turn causes them to engage in physical violence against others. This is very true because people that act out on aggression towards others are usually not very happy with themselves internally. Committing an act of violence does not have to place a high value on violence. Physical punishment and external restraint have a strong correlation aiming at homicide. Also, more recent studies show that external restraint will end up in homicide if one blames others for their own frustrations. This is just because this is how the human nature works. Just because one has a strong or weak external restraint does not mean that they will commit murder or suicide. Every individual has a mind of their own that may lead them in a certain direction depending on what they have been through in their life. Some critiques that I've came across while studying the external restraint theory have been excessive external restraint or physical punishment encourages people to blame others rather than themselves for their own problems in life, which in turn causes them to engage in physical violence against others. This is very true because people that act out on aggression towards others are usually not very happy with themselves internally. Committing an act of violence does not have to place a high value on violence. Physical punishment and external restraint have a strong correlation aiming at homicide. Also, more recent studies show that external restraint will end up in homicide if one blames others for their own frustrations. This is just because this is how the human nature works. Just because one has a strong or weak external restraint does not mean that they will commit murder or suicide. Every individual has a mind of their own that may lead them in a certain direction depending on what they have been through in their life. Throughout time, sociologists have used the anime, string, control, and social learning theory to try and exhibit what causes one to commit murder. One sociological theory, the external restraint theory, points to strong external restraint as the cause of homicide, while weak external restraint is the cause of suicide, so they're polar opposites. This may have been physically punished when they were a child, leading them to act out on their aggression towards others. Also, this type of person tends to blame others for their aggression and not themselves. They also act out in a fit of rage due to unforeseen problems of the past, causing them to suffer from a strong external restraint. People kill because it is an act of deviance that is driven from frustration that they have to act towards others that are correlated with the external restraint theory. The first one is physical punishment. This involves a parent using physical punishment to dishearten their mischievous child from further misbehavior. Examples would be spanking, slapping, hitting, and or punching. This does not always have to come from a mischievous child. It can just be because the parent wants to act out on their aggression towards the child. Theory suggests that physical punishment led to noticeable anger towards another person. When the child punished grows into an adult, they are more likely to turn their aggression towards murder. The second one is psychological punishment. Children that are psychologically punished turn their aggression against themselves rather than others. Those who experience psychological punishment would elect suicide. The threat of not being loved and more coercion, harassment, and just being blamed for everyday things when it is not their fault all leads to psychological punishment and suicide. When it comes to homicide, it is usually caused by physical punishment, whether it's when you're a child or an adult. One main cause is high levels of frustration. Homicide tends to be aggression directed towards another individual, even though they are angry with themselves. The lower class has a higher homicide rate, as well as blacks have higher homicide rates. This is due to suffering from stronger external restraint. If one suffers from extreme frustration with a strong external restraint, they would choose to direct their aggression toward homicide. This meaning they are blaming others for their frustration, not themselves. When it comes to suicide, it is caused by psychological punishment. This also means that they have a high level of frustration. Suicide tends to be when frustration and aggression is directed towards oneself and not others. One who is extremely frustrated with themselves commits suicide if they are suffering from a weak external restraint. People that commit suicide tend to blame themselves for all of their frustrations, not the outside world. To define external restraints. External restraints can be a multitude of different things. First, it means the degree to which one's actions are required to adjust to the expectations and requests of another person or persons. Evidence shows that strong external restraint is linked to homicide, while weak external restraint is linked to suicide. Henry and Short defined the strength of external restraint as the degree to which behavior is required to conform to the demands and expectations of other persons. Suffering from a weak external restraint has been linked to suicide, meaning one blames himself for their aggression. Suffering from an external restraint that leads to homicide means that one is blaming others for their aggression. Authors. The external restraint theory was developed by Andrew Henry and James Short in 1954. This theory is intended to explain why some people who are extremely frustrated commit suicide, while others who are just as frustrated turn to homicide instead. Both homicide and suicide are considered acts of frustration, fueled by aggression. This theory has been further studied by Martin Gold, stating that suffrage from strong external restraint results in homicide.